Your Excellency Yamina Karitanyi, High Commissioner from the Republic of Rwanda to the United Kingdom, genocide survivors, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome to the commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda 27 years ago. My name is Olivia Marks-Waldman. I'm the Chief Executive of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and I'm so honoured to be invited to say a few words at the opening of this important ceremony. We are here remembering and commemorating for three reasons. Firstly, simply to remember what happened 27 years ago and in the years leading up to that genocide, and to honour all those victims who were murdered in the genocide against the Tutsi. We cannot remember collectively together in person this year, but yet we are united. We are united in our commitment to remember. We are united in our commitment to honour those who survived and pay tribute to them. And we are united in our determination to make a better future. And that, of course, is our second reason for meeting, to come together and be united, although it is online this year. At the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, of course, we commemorate the Holocaust at the centre of the day, but we are also determined to remember the genocides that happened subsequently, including, of course, the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And like you all, we remember for that purpose, to remember, to unite, and to renew. We are in awe of the people of Rwanda who have turned a legacy of darkness and despair into light and hope for the future. So remembering, uniting, and renewing for the future is what we are all doing today. And I would ask you to have at the ready your candle so that your flame can show that commitment. At the end of the ceremony, be ready to light your candle and place it in your window. Kwibuka, remember, unite, renew.
What we see in both the Holocaust and Rwanda is that the propaganda tools that were used were very similar. The parallels between the two are also very chilling. The Jews are identified with a J in their passports. The Tutsi have their name clearly on their ID card. In the newspapers, there are comic strips mocking the Jews, mocking the Tutsi. The Jews become rats. The Tutsi become inyenzi, cockroaches. They're identified as outsiders, and if they're there and they're infesting our society, then you eradicate them, you remove them because they have no right to be there. Different time, different place, same message, same mechanism. The Nazis were masters of propaganda. You have to understand that what they needed to do was to turn a whole population in favor of their policies, which were extreme policies, because a successful propaganda campaign will move people from one position of civil society, and over time, people's views accommodate and change to the point at which they believe their ideas are their own, so that when the violence starts, it's fully justified. Dr. Joseph Goebbels was the minister of propaganda, which is interesting in its own right, that they would even identify a ministry position very clearly and very publicly, that this is the man that's going to tell you what you need to know. There was a hard edge to it. The press was censored by the Nazi Party. And there was a soft edge to it, which was like building this brand that everyone could buy into and feel comfortable with, because everything it put out made you feel good about being German, provided you weren't a German Jew. The 1930s was the heyday of the growth of film. People wanted to go to the movies. And the Nazis caught onto this and thought, well, this is a great way to bring our ideology of hatred into the popular culture. The Nazis made many films to plant the seeds of hatred and justify the forthcoming genocide. But one of them that stands out is called The Eternal Jew, in which the ongoing eternal threat of the Jewish community to the great idea of the German people was clearly outlined.
Sie stellen unter den Tieren das Element der heimtückischen unterirdischen Zerstörung dar. Nicht anders als die Juden unter den Menschen.
What you see in The Eternal Jew is the intentionality of genocide being planted in the society. Jews are vermin. Vermin need to be destroyed, eradicated. There's your genocidal message right there in the cinema.
A man accused of helping to incite the 1994 Rwandan genocide has lost his fight to stay in Canada. Leon Mugesera is now set to be deported. Mugesera has been fighting deportation for the past 20 years, so he'll be deported to his native Rwanda by tomorrow afternoon.
Le fameux discours de Léon Mugesera, c'est un discours qu'il a prononcé le 22 novembre 1992 à la sous-préfecture de Kabaya, alors qu'il était vice-président du parti MRND. L'année 1992, c'est une année charnière. Il y a eu, comme on dirait, donc il y a eu beaucoup de massacres dans le Mugesera, dans Kibuye. C'est un discours qui est devenu célèbre parce que, bon, d'abord, il a été prononcé par un intellectuel de haut niveau, qui est docteur en aménagement linguistique, en terminologie.
zafashe abana bazo zibohereza ku rugamba kujya gufatanya n'inkotanyi. Ibyo ni ibintu mwiyumvira muzi. Icyo gihe ni ukuvuga ko twebwe abaturage bagombye gukora, tugomba kwikorera izo ngegera tukazitsemba.
Bien sûr, c'est un discours bien structuré.
Mperutse kubwira umuntu wari unyirase ngo ni za PR. Niba batarumvise inkuru y'abafarasha basubiyeho muri Sahel bavuye muri Ethiopia, ambwira ko atayizi. Yenda kumenyesha ko banyari muri Ethiopia ko tuzabanyuza muri Nyabarongo mukagerayo bwangu.
Après ce discours incendiaire, le gouvernement n'était pas heureux avec ça. Monsieur Mugesera a trouvé refuge au Canada, mais il y a eu quand même, il a été poursuivi.
RTM started broadcasting in July 1993. There is a list of the people who took shares, and they were all from the government. Ferdinand Nahimana was the man in charge of the propaganda of the government in that time, and they wanted the radio to preach without any kind of moderation or without any contamination by something moderate, and they needed something which is really pure ethnicist radio of their own. The radio before was the voice of the authorities, of respectable people, and this time they came drunk, even vulgarity. The most popular is Kantano Habimana, who was someone who was very fluent, you know, he knew how to talk, how to make people laugh also. His speech was always funny, entertaining.
Kumva RTM, haha, ni Materi nawe yasomye ku Kamogi mu gitondo. Nibyo sha. Abasore bari hariya hepfo hafi y'ibagiro, impaza ariko ni kwiteme. Ariko nababwira yuko ibintu mwamahaye gatumagura. Byanguye nabi, natumaguyeho gatatu.
When I heard it for the first time, I said, my God, everybody felt that there is something new. In the 70s, we had in Rwanda one radio for 120 people. In the 90s, it was one for 30 people. It was that movement of the government giving or offering even radios to everyone. Even not only the killers, but the victim. You'd better listen to RTLM to know what is going on, not because you expect them to tell the truth or good messages, but still to know what is going on. People were like hypnotized. This RTLM was incredible in their efficiency. They were giving information. They are giving what to do. They were chasing people on radio.
abantu tubona bakorana n'inkotanyi ni Sebukinganda wa Butete muri Kidaho Lawrence yani umugore wa Kenyeri ku Isomera Ruhije inkotanyi ifite akabare muri commune Kidaho.
They used to say under the pile of people sometimes you have people who are hiding under the bodies, you know, so please check that too. If RTLM didn't broadcast their hate messages, the number of the victims could not be 1 million, but maybe, who knows, 20% or something like that.
We've seen propaganda being used time and time again in the past. The question is, have we really learned from that? Do we know how to identify it, both at an individual and at a governmental level?
En général, pour que les médias de la haine soient poursuivis, il faut qu'il y ait un lien soit incitation à la violence. Je crois que tout le monde a vu que c'est un discours qui va dans le sens, que ce qui soit Tutsi ou Hutu, qui va dans le sens d'un appel au meurtre.
One thing we have to watch for is the relationship between popular culture and politics. So-called harmless sketches are brewing away. They become the feeding machine for the politicians that then start to execute that in terms of ideology.
A gátlástalan cionista nyomulással szemben egyedül az erő felmutatása hatásos.
Egyre több törlesztő részletet kell fizetnünk. A bankoknak mindent szabad.
Míg dolgozunk, ezek csak lopnak. Politikus bűnözőknek mindent szabad.
Már félek kimenni az utcára. A cigánybűnözőknek mindent szabad?
Nincs magyar áru a polcon. A multiknak mindent szabad.
Elegünk van az élősködésből. Ha önnek is, október 3-án szavazzon a Jobbikra.
Do we have the courage to be able to confront hatred when we see it within our societies?
The potential for cruelty and for what happened is still there. I'm absolutely convinced.
Iyo twumvaga ikintu kuri radiyo rero twebwe abaturage na n'uyu munsi iyo ikintu bakivuze kuri radiyo tugifata impamo tukemera ko ari cyo kuri.
What we know is if we're going to prevent genocide, we have to be listening first for the words that at first seem perfectly rational and plausible, but ultimately become the words that kill.
Kwibuka27, what has just happened? It feels like I've just woken up from a nightmare that has lasted for so long. Any story that will be written about me will be full of sadness, sent with tears, and full of hopelessness. But I don't want to pass into the next generation. But it's important that I know that the genocide is not only the history, but is part of our life. And genocide was there to wipe out all the Tutsis. I remember my auntie Bonifrida and her family, that they were just all finished. Ntibakazime tuzahora tubibuka. Things started to change in 1994, but it started even before I was born, when many people were fleeing from Rwanda and they went to live in exile. I started to experience discrimination when I was at school, and I was being asked if I am a Tutsi, and hearing on the radio when they were saying that we are cockroaches and we are snakes. This whole experience really destroyed my well-being, destroyed the little girl within me. My mother was killed on my birthday. It will always be a sweet and sour day. I know how to remember, but also to feel the sadness and the grief of her every day. And it's one of the things that I'll always remember. Will always remember my mom. And it has been a long journey to go through this and to really know that it's not
what should have happened. My two brothers were killed during the genocide. My youngest brother was 2 years old, and together with about 50 children were all thrown in the fire, and they burnt them to death. I will always remember my brother Emil. I remember when he was grasping his last breath, asking me for water, and I didn't have anything to give to him. The darkest days didn't end there. I remember walking in the village and seeing a mother dead and a child sucking from its mother. At home, queuing was not part of our story, but I remember queuing on the line, and many Tutsis were about to be dead. I remember line getting shorter and shorter, and when it was just 2 people before me, my body was numb. I wasn't even thinking at that time. Someone just said, the bank in Kigali is being robbed and the killers ran away. And that's how I survived that day. I remember sitting in the bush that night, seeing the bodies being fed to the dogs. I lived like a wild animal, no hope, not even knowing that I will live another day. Kwibuka27. We still remember. I remember my family, I remember my aunt, but I have no idea where they are. Every name that I will be talking about today, it presents life. There are many missing puzzles. There are many of people that we don't know where they are at the moment. But I wished and I could see them, and we give them the honor that they deserve. Imagine a pit latrine that hasn't been used for so long because it was so full. That was my hiding place for almost 3 weeks. I remember hearing the killers behind where there was a football field when they are talking about the many people they have killed, the women they have raped, just being terrified and knowing that I could be next. Being raped in genocide, it was one of the humiliating experiences that I ever faced. I was crushed emotionally, unable to verbalize what just happened, often thinking there's no safe place to share my deepest pain. For me, stories speaks life. They created the world I desire to see. Our offspring needs to know everything about our country, everything about the life we went through, but also they need to know the family that has been taken from them. I want to tell them Rwanda that I grew up in. I want to show them Rwanda today as people who once robbed life. We will not take life for granted. As we commemorate 27 years today since genocide ended, I stand with all the survivors who live in the torment of the memory of missing our beloved ones. We want to give them respect. We want to give them honor they deserve. In this journey of grieving, we would like to insist and ask everyone to take this as their responsibility to show where our beloved ones were thrown. I will strongly ask international community and UN to put effort to fight against the genocide ideology and whoever is denying genocide against Tutsi in different ways. As a genocide survivor, I really want to appreciate the government of Rwanda and all the leaders and everything they have done for our well-being. Thank you for listening for me today.
It has been 27 years since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis took place in Rwanda. After the genocide, and as genocide survivors were fighting to piece together what was left of their lives, and as the country was struggling to rebuild itself against many odds, the international community promised two things. First, that it was going to help bring to justice those who had committed the crime of genocide. And second, that it was going to ensure that not only the genocide never happens again, but that what happened to the Tutsis of Rwanda is never forgotten. More than 2.5 decades later, it would be an understatement to say that the international community has failed to uphold its promises. It has yet to learn of the crime of genocide which was committed against the Tutsis. That is simply because the world has yet to grasp the enormity and the implications of the crime of genocide and of the genocidal ideology upon which this crime rested and still rests. Why do we say this? We say this because over the recent years, we have seen an increase in occasions and opportunities where the world has offered a global forum to give voice to those who, in one way or another, were associated with the genocidal regime which prepared the genocide and whose intent was to exterminate a part of its population. I would like to focus here on two particular areas where this is occurring. The first is academic institutions, and the second is international media platforms. Some very academic institutions, mainly in Western countries, but not solely, have increasingly been accommodating those who either flat out deny that the genocide has ever happened, or those who manipulate narratives enough to question the ways in which it happened. One fact is very disheartening here. There is a structural and systematic exclusion of Rwandan authors, researchers, and voices, and the story of the genocide is then told by Western researchers who, in almost all cases, have little to no contextual knowledge, neither of the genocide nor of the Rwandan history. In fact, in recent research published in a social sciences journal, out of 398 articles discussing Rwanda in general, only just over 10 of them were written by Rwandan authors and scholars. In recent years, we have increasingly been seeing academic researchers and so-called Rwanda experts engage in different forms of genocide denial, and many, if not all of them, have yet to be scrutinized for their rhetoric. Many of them maintain that their comments should be placed in the framework of academic freedom as an example of a questing mind asking tough questions. They hide behind this and the other ambiguities of Western academic research to avoid being held accountable for the ideological misrepresentation and manipulation of historical evidence. Data then is telling us that denial and distortion of genocide facts is actually a complex endeavor. It also goes beyond individual acts of some academic researchers and so-called Africanists to implicate the academic institutions which stand behind them and allow them to perpetuate this colonial exclusion of survivors' voices and of Rwandan expertise altogether. Denial, therefore, should not just be understood as an individual issue. It should be understood as an institutional failing as well. Another area where distortion and the intentionality of denial are obvious is international media. Over the last decades, we have seen an increase in sensationalist cases where denial and distortion of the genocide has crowded the media landscape so much that it has kept the world from keeping an eye on the due process of justice against those who were accused of genocide. It is clear now, 27 years later, that thanks to these increased media appearances, what was long thought to be a fringe group of disgruntled genocidaires is in fact a very well-organized ideological international revisionist movement. What this means is that there is a shift in locating denial. There is in fact a campaign of deceit and revisionism, and this campaign focuses on creating and spreading confusing narratives and fake information in different fora. Earlier on, right after the genocide, this happened mainly in prisons where genocidaires were serving their sentences. It also happened in refugee camps in neighboring countries in the Great Lakes of Africa and some other African countries. And in some cases, in certain key locations in Western centers of power. There were also disheartening narratives of denial in certain courtrooms around the world, from the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in Arusha, to Belgium, to Canada, and elsewhere where genocidaires were facing justice. Over the last decade, however, we have now been witnessing a shift that shows that denial has gone from the back rooms to major platforms. and it's being fueled by international media. It is increasingly rare now to see major broadcasters around the world and news organizations which have not been giving free space to those who manipulate the historical facts of the genocide. This denial has taken on different forms over time. Some of it is so subtle and the rhetoric is so convoluted that it takes time to decipher. But some of it is also very straightforward, ultimately, in both cases, becoming a powerful weapon in the hands of the genocidaires. And it helps them, therefore, avoid justice, secure sometimes early prison releases, and build international alliances. So what are the implications then of this denial? In the media, the crowding of voices where journalists and other experts espouse the narratives that the historical knowledge of genocide and its facts are nothing but a murky, contentious affair, and therefore open to debate, well, it has served to perpetuate a form of moral relativism, helping some to grow and thrive in their careers. Very few of them have questioned their positions, and very few of them have questioned the colonial nature of their storytelling. But most importantly, it is the fact that they sensationalized certain elements and ultimately crowd the real important stories that should be there. For example, in December 2016, Ferdinand Nahimana, who was one of 3 men and the top mind behind the media propaganda of RTLM, Radio-Télévision Libre de Mille Collines, was unconditionally set free after serving only 13 out of a 30-year sentence. Nahimana's quietly secured release was not a result of simple procedural court decisions. Instead, it was part of a larger, insidious and relentless international campaign to deny that the genocide happened. In academia, no rigorous research, no strong or convincing evidence is ever presented by those who question the genocide against the Tutsis. And yet, in article after articles, they have a single and simple message. They tell survivors of the genocide that what happened to them did not, in fact, happen. These experts rarely question their biases, and they fail to question their position of mostly white privilege. And in doing so, they continue to impose intellectual and moral violence on survivors of genocide and on Rwandans altogether. Thank you.
To my home and to my country Rwanda, to the land of 1,000 hills, hills that bore witness to the genocide against the Tutsi, hills that beheld atrocities and senseless killings, hills that saw terror transform into generational trauma, hills that despite it all endured, standing strong by example of Rwandan men and women who embodied resilience despite all wrongdoing. I commend you for your lasting bravery. I respect you for the grace that you carry. I acknowledge the justice you deserve and applaud the forgiveness you scarcely reserve. As we remember those who have fallen, let us not despair or appear sullen. Brick by brick, our home is home again. We can stand and say we conquered and overcame. Ngaho rero Rwanda nziza, Rwanda nkunda, Rwanda rukomeye. Nuruhe rukundo rwakoroye, rukakurokora. Bizwi ko ari Imana yakubohoye. Intwari, imidugudu n'ijuru, nibo batangabuhamya b'ubushobozi, imbaraga n'ineza ugira, uheka nk'imfura.
Greetings to you all from the Commonwealth family of 54 nations and 2.4 billion people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. I have recently returned from a visit to Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills, where the natural beauty of the land is only enhanced by the resilience and wonder of its extraordinary people. It's difficult when looking at the peaceful coexistence of the peoples of Rwanda today to accept the tragedy and scar which was inflicted on this beautiful country only 27 years ago. There has been a metamorphic change, and it would be easy for us to close our eyes and expunge from our memories the genocide against the Tutsis, to forget the pain. But we must remember. To fail to do so would be to dishonour the memories of those whose lives were taken prematurely and wrongfully. To forget and not to commemorate would leave us open to the fearsome possibility that we might once again repeat the mistakes which led to the destruction of so many families whose names will never be forgotten, but whom we will never see again. By joining together today in this and other acts of remembrance, we express again our collective determination that the passing of time will neither dim nor diminish our recognition of the shocking scale of the slaughter, nor the dreadful reality of the terror which occurred in 1994. The lives of so many people were cut short, their potential unfulfilled. So many families and communities were torn apart. As we remember them and the continuing unassuaged pain, the wider Commonwealth family unites with the people of Rwanda. Together, we renew our commitment and our resolve to deliver a common future in which all are able to share with justice, dignity, and fulfillment. As we continue to mourn the loss of those who were killed in the genocide, we honour their memory by working in practical ways to build a safer, fairer, and more inclusive world for this and succeeding generations. Learning from the sad lessons of the past, we draw encouragement from the fortitude and firmness of purpose with which Rwanda has come together as a nation in a spirit of reconciliation. During my 4 visits to the country over recent years, I have been impressed to see the progress which has been made since the dark days of 27 years ago. In particular, the young people of Rwanda are commendably involved in keeping alive the memory of those who died and in the continuing work of promoting peace, healing, and reconciliation. This aligns with the Commonwealth Charter commitments to the inclusion and empowerment of youth in all aspects of economic and social life and in promoting good governance. Leaders and other representatives of our Commonwealth family are preparing to assemble in Kigali and for Rwanda to take up the responsibilities of being chair in office of the Commonwealth. In this, we see and give thanks for the ways in which new horizons of hope and promise for humanity continue to unfold. Since Rwanda joined the Commonwealth in 2009, we have shared more closely in the stirring examples of leadership shown by the Rwandan people and their government, demonstrating that after dark times and division, justice and reconciliation can bring healing and regeneration. The fruits of true remembrance, of fresh resolve and renewal, as expressed in our theme for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, delivering a common future, connecting, innovating, transforming. With and in Rwanda, the Commonwealth will come together in its committed efforts to build back better from the ravages of the current pandemic, but also to honour the sacred memory of all those for whom we grieve today. May God bless Rwanda, and may she always remain as a shining beacon of hope, reminding us all that reconciliation, renewal, regeneration is all possible if we choose a path of peace, brotherhood, and equality. We celebrate Rwanda's new vision as a united and indivisible people, crafted from pain, but successful in joy. We will never forget.
Excellencies, fellow Rwandans, friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this solemn occasion. We remember because we have a duty to honor the over 1 million lives who perished in the genocide against the Tutsi. They were killed because of hatred. The killings were carried out with methodical aptitude, almost with scientific precision. The genocide was a well-planned, government-sponsored undertaking. We remember so that the genocide against the Tutsi is never forgotten. We hear, see, and feel the pain of countless survivors, like Antoinette, who was brave enough to share her story with us today. As we remember and reflect on our tragic past, we are reminded that the wounds of our heavy history remain open. 27 years later, we continue to discover remains of the victims of genocide. Just 2 weeks ago, more victims' remains were found buried in a mass grave behind a church. Because perpetrators still choose to keep silent, another cruel way of robbing survivors from closure and a peace which comes from laying to rest their loved ones. On their part, survivors will carry physical, emotional pain and trauma for the rest of their lives because the kind of violence which comes with genocide is too great of a burden. Ladies and gentlemen, some years ago, in this very place, I met a gentleman, one of those branded as an expert on African affairs. As we chatted, he quickly stated, "You know, High Commissioner, it would be best if your government would accept other versions of your history." I was caught off guard and responded by asking how many versions of the history of Great Britain existed. If there were several versions one could pick from, which one of them is being taught in the national curriculum? He responded, "Only one, of course. We only have one history." As we continued speaking, I realized he was perfectly comfortable suggesting that Rwanda should consider other versions of its history out of pressure or while seeking to appease some circles. He was aware the revisionist rhetoric was being promoted by the perpetrators of the genocide. The Hutu power extremists hence had a motive to confuse events, but still, he thought the perpetrators' side should weigh in heavily, allowing those who committed genocide an opportunity to casually rewrite the history of Rwanda. Yet, he agreed with widely available and well-documented facts, which confirm the only one genocide targeting Tutsis took place. Regrettably, other people, Rwandan nationals and foreigners, were killed during the 100 days of the genocide in various circumstances. Some of them because they had the courage to oppose the genocidal plan, others because they tried to protect the Tutsis who were targeted. Some others simply because they found themselves at the wrong place at the wrong time. We value the lives of all these victims, and some of them have actually been recognized by the nation because of their acts of courage. However, we regret that this is being used by some as a pretext to entertain the confusion in the naming of the genocide against the Tutsi, as indeed it is the Tutsis who were targeted during the genocide. It must be said that the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi were blacks and poor. But that should not mean they did not deserve to live or that their death can be trivialized. There are and have been many other instances in which the history as it pertains to the genocide has been questioned. And there is only one explanation which points to the appalling threat of genocide: denial. In the age of information overload and abuse of freedom of expression, perpetrators busy evading justice and their allies have resorted to tricks which help them keep genocide ideology alive. Initially, it was done by denying the existence of the crime of genocide. But because the bodies of the victims were too many to deny, and the stories of the survivors too vivid to be ignored, their efforts shifted to reducing the genocide against the Tutsi to an undefined act of mass killing. Even with a UN resolution, Resolution 2150, in place since 2014, calling for states to recommit to prevent and fight against genocide under international law, we continue to watch genocide perpetrators roam free in many capitals who are otherwise promoters of human rights, including, unfortunately, in cities in the United Kingdom, where 5 alleged genocidaires continue to exploit the judiciary to evade justice for the 13th year. This delaying of justice for genocide survivors is justice denied. Another disturbing yet growing movement we continue to watch with dismay is revisionist books, articles, and blatant attacks aimed at silencing the memory of the victims in media outlets which are flattered to be used as platforms to promote denial. Academic institutions asserting intellectual approaches aimed at rewriting the history of Rwanda are also on the rise. The importance, therefore, of commemorating is to honor the victims as well as recommit to applying the following: the responsibility to protect survivors, their well-being, and offering a safe platform for them to tell their stories without being intimidated, and fighting genocide ideology and denial. We should safeguard historical clarity and not allow those who trivialize genocide or busy attempting to rewrite the history of Rwanda to remain unchallenged. Dear friends, It remains the mandate of a well-functioning government to use its institutions to bring perpetrators to face justice and use the long arm of the law to fight impunity. Rwandans will continue to partner with those willing to walk on this path with us, for justice to be served, for peace to thrive, and for never again to become a reality. We are full of gratitude to those who, individually and collectively, have shown leadership in contributing to our journey of healing and uniting. We are in a better place because of your honest contribution. Our pledge is to continue doing our part to ensure future generations of Rwandans are proud Africans who shall inherit a dignified nation, welcoming of all her sons and daughters. Thank you.
This is the light of remembrance, the light of life.
Imitima igasubira mu nda, imitima igasubira mu bitereko.
human spirit has never died. And today, this spirit leads us into a brighter future.